Hello, and welcome to Out of Our Shell, the podcast with your two hosts. I'm Amber.
And I'm Liv.
And we're the podcast that's going to be bringing you some amazing guests, some great topics that matter to our community, and we're going to try and have a little bit of fun along the way. And speaking of amazing guests, this week we have Myka P. Kennedy, who we're going to be having a candid conversation with about mental health today. So, Liv, since you invited Myka on the pod today, why don't you tell us a little bit more about our guest before we bring them on?
Yeah, thanks, Amber. First off, I just want to let everybody know that we will be talking about sensitive information about mental health. It will include tough conversation about suicide. And so if any of that is triggered, we just want to go ahead and give everybody forewarning. And you should probably drop off now. I think we're going to say this periodically throughout the show because it's important. But with that, I did invite Myka P. Kennedy on the show because I think it is important to talk about mental health. I think it's something that all of us struggle with on a certain level. There's certainly, the more in-depth level. But I think it's something that many, many trans people suffer with. And I think it's also more so just as a society as a whole. So although this podcast is generally targeted towards transgender individuals, this one may target everyone, I think. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what Myka says. And yeah.
Perfect. Yeah,
So,
as am I. Thank you, Liv. And I think when we go to the break here, instead of our typical, ad read commercial, that type of thing, I'm going to let our folks know about the resources that are available to them so that if somebody does listen to this podcast and inadvertently is triggered, they'll know the resources that they have available to them. So if you're all set, Liv, let's get going.
Let's do it.
Okay. Hi, it's Amber, your favorite podcast host. And don't worry, I won't tell Liv. Since we're still having a hard time finding actual sponsors for the pod, I wanted to talk to you again about our Trans Pride Apple Watch band for the Apple Watch. Last time, I touched on the fact that $10 from each sale goes directly towards the Trevor Project, and I'm happy to announce that the Out of Our Shell community has raised $3,000 so far. All of these dollars go towards the at-risk services that the Trevor Project provides. Some of these services include their at-risk crisis counselors that are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I wanted to give those resources today for our listeners. Not only can you go online directly to thetrevorproject.org, but you can also call them at 1-866-488-7386. And if you don't want to call them, or you might be in a situation where you might need privacy, you can even text them anonymously at 678-678. So if this is a project that you feel like you'd like to get behind, please go out and visit us at Etsy and find out more at outofourshell.etsy.com, and know that your dollars are going towards a good cause. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the pod.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the pod. So, as promised, we have Myka P. Kennedy with us. And I just wanted to remind everybody that we're going to be discussing some topic points that might be sensitive for people. So, if you are sensitive to talk about suicide, mental health, and sexual assault, then we recommend that you drop off now. But with that, we're going to go ahead and proceed, and I'm going to introduce Myka. So, Myka, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Myka. Myka P. Kennedy, as Liv said. The P is just a P. I got rid of my middle name when I changed my name. I have been in education for almost 20 years. So I was a teacher who became a counselor, who became a department chair. Then I became a director at a local community college. And I currently am a director of curriculum at a large unit district in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. And exciting news, I just got a new job. That's going to be
Hmm.
starting July 1st as an assistant director, but I'll be overseeing post-secondary success for one of the largest districts in the state of Illinois. So really excited about that. Myka got her first
Yeah,
job.
congratulations.
Thank you. And that's a little bit about me and what I'm doing.
Okay, yeah. So, you want to go a little bit into being transgender and how that plays a role in what you do?
Absolutely. So, I came out to the world in August of 23, so not too long ago. And at that time, everybody at my work has actually been amazing. When I think about things that I need for my support, I need safety, structure, and support. Those are the three things that I need to be successful. And I'm lucky enough to say that I have all three of those things in the place where I work. But that doesn't mean
Wonderful.
that it has always been easy. Being transgender in education is difficult. You could have people from the public who see you next to their students and ask what you're doing there. And since it's a large district, I work with all the grades from kindergarten through seniors in high school. And so sometimes I need to go into the elementary schools, and if there's a parent there being a guest reader or something, I've been subject to some negative comments in that. But that doesn't make me hide because I feel that visibility is incredibly important in this area. So I go to my board meetings. I am an active participant in the school, and that is what I think is really important for anybody as they're going through this is you need to be visible. You need to be proud of who you are. And so as
Absolutely.
I continue to move through, I'm going to continue that. I'm going to continue my pride and I'm going to continue to be visible.
So anyways, we're going to go ahead and get into some of the stuff. But before we start hitting some of the mental health stuff, I just kind of want to start off with some life experiences and um, kind of like when you kind of look back in your childhood and how things may have been different from you and other kids. I think we all kind of have had that experience. Why don't you go ahead and talk about a little bit about that?
Sure. So people always wonder, when did you know that you were transgender, right? I can remember back as early as like 5 years old. I would go into my mom's closet and take her clothes and put them on and strut around and I would continue to do this for many, many years. And I just thought I was amazing and it felt so good. And there's an interesting story that'll come a little bit later about that. But really, when I was growing up, I just felt more comfortable doing that. But at that time, I didn't have the vocabulary to say, I think there's something different here. And so I just had to continue to go through this process until that vocabulary eventually caught up to me and I was able to do that because I had a very negative thought of the LGBTQ community when I was younger.
Mhm.
And it's to no fault of anybody, but growing up during that AIDS pandemic phase of the world, um, what we had was somebody down the street had passed away and we were told that we didn't want to really go down there much, didn't want to interact too much because they'd passed away from AIDS. And so all I knew is that if you're gay, you get AIDS and you die. And that couldn't be further from the truth, but that was what was in my head about the community. And so I'm like, well, I don't want that for myself. And so I was questioning myself over and over the years, and I thought, maybe I'm gay, but I can't be gay. I got to be straight. I didn't know what this other thing was. And I thought maybe I'm just a cross dresser. I just prefer wearing women's clothes. But
Yeah,
it's been, look at it now. It's amazing. Um, but I feel like it really started back then and it moved up as I was a teenager and I was able to get a job and buy some of my own clothes
yeah,
and just continued to do that until I came out to the world.
yeah. So I do want to talk a little bit about this next topic, which is sensitive. That is a sexual assault that occurred. Um, in your teenage years, and it was something that you and I talked about, and it was something that you did want to mention and bring up.
Yeah,
Um, I think maybe it kind of leads into some of the struggles you've had.
yeah,
So why don't you go ahead and discuss, if you want to go into detail, you can. If you want to just kind of discuss the overview, you want,
yeah. I'm not going to go into great detail. I don't want it to be triggering for anybody, but when
yeah,
I was 18 years old, I was, you could say sexually assaulted, but I was raped when I was 18. And very few people know that, but now the world does. And it was one of those things that I continue to reflect back on because at that time I was a guy, and a guy can't say anything about getting raped like that. And so I held it
yeah,
in. It was mine, and I had a lot of guilt and shame about that. But I continued to work through it, and I just pushed on. And as Liv said, it has played a part in what I'm going to be talking about a little bit later with my mental health as I continue to go through my bout with mental health. I've had to experience some flashbacks of that time, and I can just close my eyes and feel being held down and um, the pain and the trust that just got broken from somebody that I had a lot of trust in, a good friend of mine. And it was over. And but I will carry that with me forever and that experience forever. And it is something that I'll never forget. And again, as I deal with those flashbacks now, I continue to think about what I can do to make myself better and to not blame myself anymore. And people need to know that if this happens, it's not your fault. I blame myself, but I realize I did nothing except take this person to their door of their house. And then I was um, held down by people who were in the house waiting for me. Um, and I'll never forget that. And I had, like I said, a lot of guilt and shame and felt blame for that. But um, you have to let that go. You got to move on. And I felt like I did a good job of separating that from my life for a good amount of time. But like I said, it's been the flashbacks coming back as I've been dealing with other aspects of my mental health now.
okay. So that does take us into the mental health that, you know, I believe in October 2023 is when you started realizing that there was um, alarms of mental health and um, kind of the beginning stages, I guess, if there's a beginning stage. But why don't you go ahead and start out with some of the things that have taken place?
Absolutely. So it was really in October of 23, as Liv said, that I really started feeling like something is not right here. I was having thoughts of self-harm. Maybe some thoughts of SI were starting to creep in. SI is suicidal ideation, but it wasn't anything that was so uh, disabling to me during the day that I was able to kind of push it off. But at the same time, I was alarmed. And I did go to my doctor, and she did put me on some antidepressants at that point in time, more so as a precautionary step so it wouldn't get worse, was the hope. Um, People wonder what was the trigger at that time that really made it happen in October of 2023. I don't have a good answer for that. That's the tricky thing about mental health. Sometimes it just hits you at the time when it decides to hit you. And that is something that I have tried to think about, and I'll constantly wonder why as I've gone through my struggles. But as I moved through that process in October, November, December, and trying to level out medication, trying to figure out what was the right medication, the right dose, because many antidepressants don't work for everybody, which is something that I found out through this process as well. It's kind of a hit or miss thing. So doctors prescribe one antidepressant and it might work really, really well for somebody. They can prescribe that same antidepressant to somebody else and it won't do anything, or it might even make the symptoms worse. And
Yeah.
so going through that process, they had to find what was the right medication for me. And I'll be honest, at that point in time, I don't think that they had found that. And that's when things kind of escalated
Yeah.
into um, where I've been the past few months.
Yeah. So why don't we go ahead and go into that? We talked about some of this. I have the notes here. Why don't we go ahead and talk about January?
Okay, so in January, that was Um, some of the best times. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, as the saying goes. On January 17th, I legally changed my name and got a new driver's license, got new everything. I was Myka P. Kennedy, which was a great experience because I submitted all my documentation actually on January 7th. And then in the state of Illinois, you have to publish your name change for many weeks before you can actually have the name change hearing, or you could do a waiver for that. I submitted a waiver because I thought that it would be best for my family if I didn't have to put that in the local papers and things like that. And so then I scheduled that hearing on January 17th. And on that day, while we were there, the judge goes, "Why don't we just change your name too?" And I'm like, ah. So get my name changed too, all at the same time. It was a great day. Um, but then also at that time, I started experiencing greater thoughts of um, suicidal ideation. And right around that same time, I had an aborted attempt at suicide, where I had taken an extension cord and had plans to hang myself, but I aborted that plan. That plan got aborted, so that didn't go through. But then I had this constant thought of what got me to this point and what am I trying to do to myself? And I couldn't figure it out. And it just continued to spiral from there. So I also, after that time, started utilizing over the counter medications. Um, Namely, Excedrin migraine was kind of my over the counter medication of choice. And I would take large amounts of that at, on a regular basis just to feel high, euphoric, um, just like I was numb to the world and everything else that was going on. And um, and that was not great, but that's where that's where I was at. Um, Going through that process, that was pretty much all of February that I was doing that. And then
Yeah.
so and then which leads to early March where I actually took a large amount of Excedrin migraine with the thought and idea of trying to kill myself again. That was my second attempt. Um, and so I started throwing up. Then I started inducing vomiting in order to um, save myself, essentially. And my body started to reject it. And um, I didn't have to go to the hospital or anything. I was able to take care of myself. But um,
Yeah.
that just,
So
go ahead.
I was just going to ask a question in regards to the family dynamic. Was anybody in your family aware of these struggles, and were there any support systems at this time?
I'm really good at hiding things. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I hid dressing for my entire life until I came out to my wife, and I hid this as well. So nobody knew. My wife didn't know until later in March, and um, friends knew parts of it, but not all of it. I let certain friends into bits and pieces because while I was in therapy at that time, I worked with my therapist to create a safety plan. And part of that safety plan was to have people that I could connect with and talk to when I had those moments. So I created one safety plan for that time that I thought about hanging myself. And so I told a small group of friends about that, and they were aware of that. But then I didn't tell them about the second part of the over-the-counter medication and using and abusing that. So I hid that from them. And so it was not a good dynamic. And
Yeah.
I shouldn't be proud of the fact that I was able to hide this because
No.
there were lots of people out there who wanted to help me and asked me to go to inpatient or at least intensive outpatient therapy. My therapist was concerned and asking me to go to those things for a higher level of care. But I just kept fighting everybody off and said, that's not what I need. That's not who I am. That's not where I'm at. It's not at that level of struggle. Um,
Yeah.
and I just really couldn't admit to myself how bad it had gotten.
Yeah. So you now you have a circle of friends that are aware. Um, you're not maybe not taking the Excedrin, but you're looking for other outlets.
Yeah.
Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So after I utilized the Excedrin migraine and had that night where I abused them in a great deal, I needed something else. I wasn't going to do that to myself again. So at that point in time, I started cutting. And I was cutting almost daily. And it was anytime I had a little stressor in my life, I reverted to cutting. And that was just where I was at. I was cutting, and even to this day, as I've gone through various processes, I still struggle with that a little bit. I'm proud to say that I haven't cut in a week and a half, as of today, but
Yeah.
that's still a struggle that I have. And it's something that I know that even though it's been a week and a half, I'm not out of the woods yet. And I need to continue to think about it and process and talk to friends and just know that I have a great support network, which is so important as you're going through this.
Um, I think we're going to go a little bit into cutting once we kind of get into the diagnosis part. But can you just, so our listeners and viewers are aware of what exactly cutting is and what it does and what it releases?
Sure. So cutting is simply taking a sharp object and cutting a part of your body. Lots of people cut their stomach, their thighs, their arms, their wrists, things like that. I have cut the top of my right forearm. That has been the place that I've been doing my cutting. But the reason that cutting works for so many people is that it releases a chemical called dopamine in your brain. And so dopamine is your feel good, happy drugs, that feel good, happy chemicals that make you feel like, okay, whew, I can calm down now. And so you can get that same release of dopamine by talking to a loved one, listening to music that you really enjoy, doing all those things. But if you're in the moment and you need a quick release of a lot of dopamine, cutting works. And it's kind of sad to say that that works, but it does. And that's the reason why it needs to release those chemicals in order to kind of offset what else are stressors that are
Yeah.
currently plaguing you in your life.
Okay, thank you. So now you're seeking therapy. You're showing the cutting. It sounds like now at this point your therapist is really pushing for some kind of help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So at that point in time, there was a lot of people pushing me to get extra help. So my therapist, who I was with for a long time, she helped me when I came out as transgender and going through the gender dysphoria of figuring out how to come out to my wife and the kids and things like that. So her and I went way back. And so um, in March, she said, March of 24, so really recently, she said she couldn't continue service with me unless I got a higher level of care. And so she gave me the list of a couple of practitioners that had more experience in self-harm and suicidal ideation who I could reach out to. So I reached out to two of them, filled out the intake forms online, and then submitted them. And I got calls from both of them saying, "We can't help you. You need a higher level of care than what we can provide. So until you check yourself into an inpatient program or go through a PHP, which is a partial hospitalization program, um, they refused to see me as well." And at that moment in time, I just broke down because I'm like, I'm finally reaching out for help and nobody wants to help me. When in reality, they really wanted to help me. They just wanted to make sure that I was doing what I needed to do to make the best choices for myself into the future. So at that point, I agreed to go to a partial hospitalization program, which basically means that I would be staying at home. I wouldn't be hospitalized, but I would go to therapy all day, Monday through Friday, and then I would come home at the end of the day. So it was a full, intense day of therapy. You eat lunch there, you get some breaks there, but really that's your day to day as you go to therapy. And
Micah,
oh, yeah,
I just wanted to jump in. I have a clarifying question, just real quick. So,
sure.
the partial hospitalization program, you're at a place all day, then you're coming home. At this point, have you talked to your wife, your family members about what's going on?
At this point, they still didn't have all of the information.
Okay.
I was still hiding it, but they knew that I needed more care. They didn't know until I actually started the program and had to, I felt like everybody needed to know at that point in time. But it's on March 19th, Wednesday, March 19th, was when I went in for the intake for the partial hospitalization program. And when the therapists did the intake with me, they made a soft push to have me go into inpatient. They didn't push me really hard. They could tell that I wasn't ready for it, but they made a soft push for it. And that was Wednesday, March 19th. On Thursday, March 20th, I get my days, I'm off a day here, sorry. But on Thursday of that week, um, I had my first day of that partial hospitalization program. And it was at that time that I, I still wasn't telling everybody everything. I was still hiding, but I was in the program, um, and I didn't think it was going to help me. I went through that first full day of therapy, and I walked out to my car in tears. And I just thought, this didn't help me. There's nothing that's going to fix me at this point in time. I felt so hopeless. And on Friday, I was driving back to therapy. I decided to give it another chance. It was a slightly snowy day, and the road just had just enough snow in order to make the streets really slick. And as I was driving there, I thought of all the ways I could crash into trees or other things and make it look like an accident. And um, even swerved off the road a couple of times, um, but course corrected on my way to therapy. Um, I made them aware of that because you had to do a check-in sheet at the beginning of each day. Where are you at? How hopeful are you? Anger, depression, anxiety. On a 1 to 10 scale, you would rate those. And then it asked if you had any thoughts of self-harm or any thoughts of suicide. And so I checked yes to both of those. About 15 minutes into therapy on that day, they pulled me just to question me about it. Where are you at? Why are you thinking these things? And at that point in time, since I was in their program, they had the ability to involuntarily push me into inpatient therapy. And so that was my first introduction into inpatient therapy. And that was on that Friday in March, I believe it was either the 21st or 22nd at this point in time. But um, it was when I went through that and I had visiting hours within the inpatient program where I finally came clean to my wife and told her what I had been going through and the various attempts and things I had tried, and she didn't know, and I felt awful for that. I mean, my wife and I have been through a lot. She has supported me when I came out. She just hugged me and said, "I love you. It'll be okay. We're going to figure this out." And we've been trying to figure it out. And here I couldn't be honest about something I was struggling with. And um, it was really hard to tell her. It was really hard for her, I'm sure, to hear that I hadn't been totally honest about what I'd been going through and how bad it actually was. Even though some of these things I was doing in the house while she was at work, while the kids were at home, and it's through that I landed myself in inpatient therapy. But I truly feel that that was the spot that I needed to be at that moment in time. Inpatient therapy really uh, gave me the change and the skills that I needed in order to move forward, even though I couldn't see it at that moment in time.
Yeah. So I do want to talk a little bit more about inpatient because I think counseling is important. It's probably the most important thing. Um, People mesh together and some people collide. And so I know that you had some issues with that, and you also had some good issues, good memories of it. So why don't you go ahead and just talk a little bit about your counselors?
Absolutely. So, when I was in the partial hospitalization program, I had a counselor who I just didn't click with. And it's very important to be able to click with your therapist. If you don't mesh well, then you're not going to have a successful therapy session. And counselors are aware of this. They know that if you say, "Hey, this just isn't working. I need to break up with you. I need to try somebody else." They understand that. It doesn't hurt their feelings. The way one person counsels might be great for somebody, but it might not be great for you. Just like those antidepressants that we were talking about earlier. One might be great for you, but might not be great for somebody else. And so you need to be able to um, be okay with that. But where I was at, I didn't get a say in that. So when I was going through that program, I was forced to stay with this person throughout my partial hospitalization program. Um, but I didn't work with her while I was in the inpatient program. So when I was in inpatient, I was in there for almost a week. For the first 2 days, that Friday and Saturday, I didn't get out of my room. I just laid in my bed, cried, looked out the window, called it my prison. Um, it was an experience that I never wanted to saw myself in. I thought I had failed the world and myself and my family and my friends that I ended up there. I couldn't see um, the bright future that could potentially be there. All I saw was disappointment, and I was ashamed, and I had a lot of grief and all those things that I had to overcome. And it was on the third day of therapy of the inpatient program where a counselor, her name's Camilla, um, came into my room and just kind of laid it to me straight. And she goes, "Okay, hon, you need to get up and get moving. If you ever want to get out of this program, these are the things you need to do. You need to start talking to people. You need to hang out. You need to go to groups. You need to be interactive. You need to be social. You need to show that you're making progress. Right now, what you're doing is not good for you, and it's not going to do you any favors. Time to get up and get moving." And so she like literally pushed me out of my bed in order to get me going to group. And I went to a couple groups on that day, felt a little bit better, started talking to people on the floor, started to feel a little bit better because I'm like, oh, because even I, who was a counselor for years and a department chair who oversaw counselors and dealt with a lot of crisis situations, still had a stigma in my mind of what inpatient was like and what type of people are in an inpatient program. And now I was there. And so I really quickly learned all those people are just like me. They have families, they have kids, they have jobs, they have things that they really care about, but they're just struggling with a moment in time and they needed help, just like I needed help. And I didn't really experience that until I was out of my room and interacting with people. And
Yeah.
when we were just talking, it was a great experience. And all the counselors on the floor were great. Interacting with the people was amazing. We did some of the groups were walking groups, and we would just walk and talk, and you just got to know people. And again, everybody was at the exact same spot and dealing with similar but different things, and it didn't matter. Everybody just wanted everybody else to feel better. And so I did that for almost a week before they let me out. So on that Wednesday of the following week, I was meeting with my psychiatrist in the inpatient program. And at that point in time, as Liv said, I received a diagnosis. And in the same breath, the psychiatrist said, I think we got a good diagnosis for you, borderline personality disorder, and you're getting discharged tomorrow. And I got the wind knocked out of me. I'm like, whoa, you're going to drop a big thing on me, like borderline personality disorder, and then
Yeah.
say, we're discharging you tomorrow. And I didn't know how to react to that. I just felt rocked. I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me, and um, I had a lot to work through that night. It was a lot dealing with that, um, but I got
Yeah.
through it.
So you go out and it wasn't really quite the program you had expected in regards to how you would have an exit strategy.
Correct.
So, yeah, so we talked a little bit about being codependent on the program because, like you said, there are people there that you relate to. You have people you can talk to. What can you go into a little bit about that kind of codependency on the program and how it works?
Wait, wait,
Absolutely.
wait, wait, wait,
So,
wait, wait, wait.
oh,
I'm gonna
sorry, go
jump
ahead.
in. I'm going to totally jump in because I don't want to skip over this part yet before we get into the next part. But I am curious, Micah. There's something called trans broken arm syndrome, where everything can just be blamed on being transgender. Like you go into the emergency room with a broken arm, and it's because you're on HRT. That's why you have the broken arm, right? But that's not necessarily true. Did you experience any of that from now? Obviously, your therapist that you've been going through for years, she knew you, she knows about your journey and everything, but these strangers in the inpatient program, did you experience any of this kind of like misplaced blame, this trans broken arm syndrome while you were there?
It's a great question, and I can honestly say no. Um,
That's awesome.
from the moment I walked in that door, I was in the emergency room. I was, Miss Kennedy, what are we going to do for you today? And when that counselor came up to me, it was, ma'am, we're going to get you up and moving, and we're going to do the things. So, and I never came out as transgender to people on the floor, but as soon as they saw me, I was they use she, her pronouns just from looking at me and hearing my story. And so I felt embraced by that. And so I did not feel at any moment in time that anybody at any place blamed this on my being transgender. And I had a
That's
real fear of
fantastic to
that.
hear. Yeah,
Right. Because I
I
had a real
imagine.
fear of that because it is true. But
Yeah.
I didn't feel that that was happening to me at that moment in time.
Good.
Oh, that's good to hear. Okay, continue with
Yeah.
your interview.
Mhm.
Sorry.
No, no, that was a great
Great
question.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, when I got out of therapy, real quick, just as you're leaving therapy, it's um, typically customary for everybody, which I didn't know this. They write in everybody's books and positive affirmations, things like that. And while I was sleeping the night that Wednesday night, Camilla again, the counselor, came in because she was she was rounding shifts, so she would come in and check on me every 15 minutes. That's just the rules. Somebody has to have eyes on you every 15 minutes on the floor. And so she took my journal And in my journal, she wrote, "When you think it's the end and it's all finalized, that will be your beginning. This is your beginning." And I got that typed up and framed on my desk at work, and I carry that with me everywhere I go because that was just really powerful to me. Is that there were lots of times throughout that process where I felt like it was the end, or I thought it was the end, and I thought it was the final chapter for me. And even going through the program, that program, it wasn't the end, it was just a new beginning. And so um, I hold that quote close to me that she wrote in my journal that night. But once I got out of therapy on that Thursday and I went home, it was a lot. I was, you're thrown right back into real life. And you go from all the safety structure and support in the world to none. I went home and I was on my own. And I had my wife and my 4 kids and my 2 dogs and all the things. And it was great to see all of them, but all of that stress of all of a sudden being around everybody again and trying to be, the perfect parent and partner and all those things was a lot to handle. And um, I actually cut one of my first nights out of inpatient because it was just so stressful um, being out of that safe environment. And so I wanted nothing more on those first couple of nights out than to go back. I wanted to be back in that inpatient program. I wanted that safety and structure and support. I knew who I could turn to help me out. I knew there were going to be people there I could talk to. I knew that I had all the support that I needed at any moment in time, day or night. And um, when you lose all of it all at once, it's a lot. And
Yeah.
I I really longed to go back. And so um, as you said, there's that codependency on this of you don't want to be there while you're there, but as soon as you get out, you realize that you got what you needed while you were there, and the only way to get back in is to do something again. And so um, I never understood how relapse works. I'm like, if you stop doing something, you should be able to stop doing something. But at that point in time was the first time that I was like, I could totally relapse right now in order to get that structure back in my life. And I didn't, but I fought through that and I had to do a lot of things in terms of connecting with friends. And I did go back into the partial hospitalization program. So the next day out of the inpatient program, I did start that partial hospitalization program again, where I was going to therapy all day. And I was more ready for it at that moment in time. I wasn't ready for it when I first did it, but then again, I was starting to feel good about that program. And then it ended after 10 days because insurance said I only need 10 days of partial hospitalization. They don't know me. They didn't know my story. They didn't know anything about me, but insurance says you get 10 days. And so at that point in time, after 10 days of that program, I was done. And then I went down to half days. And again, I only got 10 days of those half days because insurance said so. And so I went to work half days, went to the intensive at that point in time it was called IOP, intensive outpatient therapy. That was only a half day program. And um, and I struggled with that a lot because again, I was stuck with my therapist who I was with initially, who I didn't click with in that partial hospitalization program. Um, I went to a support group trying to do, something really good for myself, and it was um, an awful experience. At that support group, they openly talked about suicide and the attempts that they had made, and it was super triggering for me. And I went home and I cut that night, um, and I cut a handful of other times when I got out of the inpatient program. Um, just a couple days ago, I went to the partial program, the IOP program for my half day, and I was checking in with the nurse practitioner. And I told her, in terms of my suicidal ideation, I was just having fleeting thoughts. And what that looked like was if somebody told me that I would go to sleep and not wake up tomorrow, how would that make me feel? I said it would make me feel good. I'd feel happy. I'd be okay with that. And the cuts on my arms were also getting bigger and deeper. And at that point in time, she decided to hospitalize me again. So I had a second hospitalization while I was still going through the program of trying to get myself better. And at that second
Yeah.
hospitalization, I feel that even though it was a short one, I was in there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then I was out. Um, we were able to create a better treatment plan for me when I got out. And so I um, disconnected with that therapist. I completely ended that program. I went back to work full time because, as I told you at the beginning, safety, structure, and support, I get that at work.
Yeah.
And so that's where they said, and I agreed, that that's where I'd be safest, is if I was at work full time. And so I went back to work. And then I gathered another outside therapist, an outside psychiatrist, and um, and those are the supports that I have in place for myself now. So I still have outside supports that are giving me everything that I need, while I still have the safety structure and support of work. And it has been a really positive change. And I can honestly say today I feel better than I have felt in the past 6 to 7 months. But I'm also very early on in my recovery, right? I just got out of my second hospitalization a week ago, and I still think about cutting, but I haven't cut for a week and a half since before I went in to that second hospitalization. So I'm
Yeah.
making progress. It's a struggle every day. You got to think about it. You got to fight for it. You got to figure your worth, and you just got to keep pushing forward.
Yeah. So are you currently in any therapy groups or I mean, I take you're at least at the very least seeking therapy.
Yeah, so I have a psychiatrist who's going to help me with my med management, my medicines. So I'm on quite a bit of medication now due to the borderline personality disorder diagnosis. But I feel like it has been helping leveling me out a little bit. Um, and then I have an appointment with a new therapist who kind of specializes in this as well. So that will help me, and that is in another week. And then I'm on a wait list for a group for what's called a DBT, dialectical behavior therapy group, which is supposed to be really good to help me change some of my behaviors, such as my cutting, and help me kind of manage my moods that I get during with the borderline personality disorder. Because um, borderline personality disorder is kind of like bipolar, if you think about it like that. That's something that more people probably know about. But instead of days of mania and days of depression, I pivot much faster. So, um, and when it happens, when I go up, I crash really hard, really fast. And that's what leads to me making choices that might not necessarily be best.
Yeah.
So it's been a trip trying to figure out how to manage all of this, but I think we're finally getting there.
So we are gonna start closing out, and we do like to close things out on positive notes. But before we do that, is there anything that you wanna let our viewers and listeners know um, if they're struggling with mental health?
It's okay not to be okay. Um, I've said that many times, but until I went
Yeah.
through this, I didn't really feel it. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to let your friends and family in on what you're struggling with. They want to help you. It's okay if you need to go to the emergency room and get placed into an inpatient program, you're not judged. It's not going to change who I am. It doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change our dynamics. It is something
Yeah.
that you need to do in order to get the help that you need in order to continue to move forward. So it's okay. Embrace it
Yeah.
and know that you're just struggling at a moment in time. And it's important to get the help so that way you can come out better on the other side.
Wonderful. Thanks for talking about all that. I know it's not an easy topic to discuss. So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I mean, I've carried a lot of disappointment, but I'm not ashamed of what I've been through. It's it's a part of who I am and it's a part of my story. And that's why I'm willing to share it here today is that I hope it's a little therapeutic for me, selfishly, but also I hope that it can help somebody else who might be going through a tough time. It's okay. You don't need to be ashamed.
Yeah. Well, with that, we are going to go into some of the lighter tones. I guess as we're running, we are actually a little bit past time. So I do want to talk about one thing that really drew me to you, and that was your 1 year anniversary reel. And I want you to talk a little bit about what compelled you to make that. And also, we're going to talk about Amber's quote because Amber has if our listeners and viewers don't talk to Amber, Amber always knows the right things to say. And so go ahead.
No, 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 no. That's only because I talk a lot and eventually something good comes out during all of that talking, but it's only because of the
Uh,
quantity of the talking that I do. You can ask
yeah.
anybody
Well,
that hears me.
we could have a show that about that down the road.
Oh
That
yeah, yeah.
argument,
We sure
but
if you want to do a show where I just talk the entire time, yeah, let's do it. I'm sure our viewers will love that.
All the great Amberisms.
yeah, Amberisms. That's what we're going to call them. Yeah. All
So
right. So go ahead.
absolutely. So I had never done a reel before. Just, but for my 1 year anniversary of transitioning, which was March 7th, I decided to put together a video just kind of talking a little bit about my journey up to that point in time. So I talked about my family, talked about a little bit about my mental health at that time, and talked about just um, the pure joy I had. But I also talked about some of the fears that I've had and some of the bigotry that I faced. Like I said at the beginning, I got a new job. I was in an interview for a job. I was in an interview for a job, um, and a president of a college. It was just me and him in the room. Looked me in the eye and said, "You're going through something very personal right now, which is wonderful, but you come with a lot of baggage." And so I had talked about that a little bit, and
Yeah.
just the pure um, fear and things like that that I have, and I don't want there's a lot of negativity around the trans community right now, and people are speaking untruths in order to make people afraid. And um, I look at the three of us on this call, and I'm like, who could be afraid of us? Why would anybody want to be afraid of who we are and the love that we have and how we're living our lives? And it was, and I just kind of went into that a little bit. And the dysphoria, but also the euphoria of like being able to squeeze water out of your hair in the shower for the first time, and
Yeah.
um, just all those experiences that we get to have. And before I made this video, I was talking with Amber a little bit. We were passing some messages back and forth, and she had a quote that made it into the video, and that quote is, transition is so, so special, and we only get to go through it once, and it is only a very small group of people that get to go through it. It should be a reserved time of life where the moment is recognized and celebrated. And that meant so much to me, um, those words. And I actually sent my video to Amber ahead of time. I'm like, oh, FYI, I quoted you in the video, and I believe your
I'm like,
comment
oh
was,
great, what did
uh-oh,
I
what did
say?
I say?
Yeah, exactly,
Right?
So
right?
Yeah.
And I still have the voicemail that you left me because I didn't have your phone number. You had mine, but I didn't have yours. And so I got this call from
Yes.
California. I'm like, I'm not answering this. It's got to be a spam
Yeah.
call. And it was you. And you were crying. And
Yeah, it
you were
moved me.
trying
Your
to.
video was
Yeah.
extremely moving, especially the parts,
Hmm.
like it wasn't necessarily the dysphoria pieces that like got to me. It was like hearing the joy in your voice and in the reel regarding like the euphoria
Yeah.
pieces. And I'm sure I was at a certain point in my hormonal cycle. I was like a mess of tears that night and everything. And I just remember driving and listening to it, and
Yeah.
it just got me. I highly recommend everybody checking out
Yeah.
Myka's 1 year
Absolutely.
anniversary.
I mean, I still
Definitely.
listen to it over and
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
really,
thank
really good.
you.
You did a great job
It
on
just
for somebody that never did a reel. You did a great job on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I put some
Absolutely.
videos in there of my or some pictures at the end of it, showing my
Hmm.
transition over the year as well. But um, I still have that voicemail saved on my phone,
Oh,
and have it downloaded. It just it means a lot to me, and
of
I just wanted to say thank you.
course. All my love to you.
All right. Well, with that, I think we'll go ahead and call it a episode. And
Yeah.
I just want to thank you, Micah, for being on the show and sharing your story with us. So,
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
and I hope it
Myka.
helps other people along the way. Thank you.
yeah.
I
And
think
we may
so. I
put
mean,
the,
we create, I'm so sorry. See, this is me talking too much again. Whenever
no,
we do these types of things where it's either transition, being visible in transition, talking about our mental health, we're creating ripples in a pond. And we never know where those ripples are going to go out to and what rocks those ripples are going to press up against and actually make a difference and start eroding away and helping those individuals. So, Mike, I really appreciate your vulnerability and willing to make a ripple in the pond and help others out here on this very public platform. So thank you.
Thank you.
and we may put the video up at the end of our show here. So,
Oh, that'll be fun. We
uh,
should do that.
we
Yeah,
can, yeah, I think that'll be neat. All right. Well,
perfect.
with that, we're out and we'll be back in a minute. Thanks
Bye,
again, Micah.
Myka.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, it's Amber, your favorite podcast host. And don't worry, I won't tell Liv. Since we're still having a hard time finding actual sponsors for the pod, I wanted to talk to you again about our Trans Pride Apple Watch band for the Apple Watch. Last time, I touched on the fact that $10 from each sale goes directly towards the Trevor Project, and I'm happy to announce that the Out of Our Shell community has raised $3,000 so far. All of these dollars go towards the at risk services that the Trevor Project provides. Some of these services include their at risk crisis counselors that are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I wanted to give those resources today for our listeners. Not only can you go online directly to thetrevorproject.org, but you can also call them at 1 866 488 7386. And if you don't want to call them, or you might be in a situation where you might need privacy, you can even text them anonymously at 678 678. So if this is a project that you feel like you'd like to get behind, please go out and visit us at Etsy and find out more at outofOurShell.etsy.com and know that your dollars are going towards a good cause. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the pod.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the pod. So, Amber, that was that was an in-depth conversation for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Myka is my guest, and
Mm-hmm.
I certainly have a couple things I want to say. But why don't you go ahead and go first and let us know your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, which was just like unknown to me, was the
Mm,
process of like the mental health, like how you can get help. And what I really liked about what Micah shared was she had talked about how she felt very rejected when they told her like, oh, we can't help you. You need to go to like the next level of help and everything. But she didn't know
mm-hmm.
that that next level of help would be able to help her, would be able to get her
Yeah.
the help that she needed. And so I just kind of hope that maybe if there's other folks that might find themselves in the same situation, that they'll kind of have listened to this and will know the process more and can
Yeah.
kind of know like, okay, this would be where I need to be, or this would be the help that I should seek out. Or, if I do get an initial rejection, it's probably because like I need additional help. So I think that was one of
Yeah.
the bigger takeaways for me. And then secondarily too is just for me, like I feel so much for Myka, and the fact that this was such like an acute occurrence that happened so quickly out of
Hmm.
the blue, and just kind of like rocked her world so suddenly
Yeah.
like this. And so
Yeah.
that to me also was just kind of eye opening as well too, that
Hmm.
that at any point in time, any of our friends, brothers, sisters, could you know
Yeah.
need help like this. So it was a really great
Absolutely.
episode to explore this kind of mental health topic. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What
I
about
feel
what
the
about
same with
yourself?
every.
What about yourself? Where
Yeah,
what
I
was your
think
kind of
that
takeaways?
I think mental health is kind of the silent struggle.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of got that with her struggling for months. Some people struggle for years, and
Hmm.
um, and um, nobody knows, nobody sees it, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think that I got that, and just again what you said, just how the program works. Um, it was interesting her talking about codependency on it, because I can see how that,
Hmm.
all of a sudden now you do see all these people and they all share your same, story.
Yeah.
Maybe each one has different, different style to it, but yeah. So
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think this was a really important topic to explore. And, to our audience out there, please feel free to rewind the podcast if needed to grab those Trevor Project resources that we mentioned
mm,
during our breaks. I think that's about all the time that we have, though, for today. And so I'd
mhm.
like to thank our guest, Myka Kennedy, for joining us on the pod this
Yeah.
week. I also want everybody to know that you can find us on Instagram at Out of Our Shell, grab our merch at Etsy at Out of Our Shell, and tune into the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And you can also help our little podcast grow and reach more people by liking this episode and sharing it with a friend, maybe even a friend in need. We really appreciate all the support that friends like you provide to us. So, on behalf of Liv and myself, we'd like to remind you all to follow your joy because it can
Yeah.
never lead you in the wrong direction. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week on Out of Our Shell, the podcast. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hey there, come out of your shell. Hey there, come out of your shell.
Don't forget to subscribe.